So good afternoon, everyone. It's such a great pleasure to welcome Mr. Tom Horsey to this competence-based middle years program that we are doing in our school, in Colegio Internacional de Sevilla San Francisco de Paula. So first of all, I'm Luis Rey. I'd like to introduce Mr. Tom Horsey, a long-time friend and a very admired colleague in some ventures. Mr. Tom Horsey was born in Exeter, in England, and then transferred himself to Sevilla, where he's been living for a long time now. He's what we call a serial entrepreneur. He is a venture capitalist as well, and is very much involved in the entrepreneurship environment in our city and beyond. He has an amazing career, a wonderful family that we have been lucky enough to have in our school as well, and we may call ourselves lucky to have him as a close friend. So without any further ado, I will yield the floor to Mr. Horsey, and please join me in giving a warm welcome to Mr. Horsey. Well, now I will mute myself to avoid any interference.
Okay. Can you all hear me okay? Anybody that can't hear me, raise a hand. You can all hear me fine. Brilliant. Okay. Well, I'm very pleased that you clapped before I spoke, because you might not be clapping afterwards. No, I hope you will. So just before I jump into this, as Luis has just said, I have a daughter at the school. I did have a son called Maria Horsey. So all of you have to go up to her and tell her how beautiful and how intelligent she is. Okay, it's good, glad to hear it. You go up and you tell her, Maria, you're the most wonderful girl in the world, because she'll feel very good about it. So anyway, I'll go through my story. So as Don Luis was saying, I'm I guess I've been an entrepreneur at her heart all my life. When I was 13 years old, I was buying and selling things that I probably shouldn't have been buying and selling. And I sort of went on from there. I set up my first company at 18, and then went to university, stopped the business that I set up when I was 18 to 19, which funnily enough was in Seville. I was in university in the UK. Then I spent a year working for Esso, a big petrol company, a big oil company. Decided that big companies weren't for me. You're very much a tiny fish in a huge ocean, and everything that you do, I felt that it was suffocating my proactivity, because whatever you do, the company didn't really make a difference, and nobody really seemed to care. And so I decided that I wanted to work for smaller companies. I was offered a job. I was going to go to South America, but I was offered a job at an oil trading company in just south of London, and in an advertising agency in Seville. So lo and behold, I end up moving to Seville in 1996 to work in the online advertising department, to set up the online advertising department of a tiny little agency. There were 4 people when I moved in, and since that time, my professional career has been very linked to Andalusia. So what happened then? I start off working as, and I think it's a sensible idea for anybody, even those that are entrepreneurs, to initially start working for a third party, because it allows you to gain experience in what you're doing in a particular sector, to get sort of professional experience of how to develop teams, how to develop processes, how to work with other people. And so in my instance, I did that for 5 years. I basically ran the company. I came in as I wasn't that much older than yourselves. I was 23 years old. I think I was 23 years old when I started. I was the 4th employee. I left when I was 27, and I'd grown the company. It wasn't all me, obviously, but I was running the day-to-day, and the company had grown to 35 people, and then there were complications with the owner, and I went off. I'd already set up a company of my own in the interim, in effect to charge commissions to the company where I was working, and I decided to set up my own thing. So I was very lucky at that point to get involved at the very beginning of what was mobile content. These days, you know, we all take it for granted that all content and any content is available on our mobile phone. That wasn't the case at all 20 years ago. You didn't have internet connections, believe it or not, on your mobile phones, and we were selling mobile content at a time when there wasn't even an internet connection to download them. So that company, which I set up in 2001, is still operating now. So it's been going for 20 years. Our main market these days in that specific company is South Africa. All run out of, well, it's run out of both Malta and Seville, but most of the staff are based in Seville. So it's a rather odd, and most of them, unlike yourselves, don't even speak English, and they're running a business in the southernmost point of almost the world, in Africa, in an English-speaking market, well, English and Afrikaans speaking market, and also some dialects of Zulu, and some of them don't even speak English. So anything's possible in that respect. However, because mobile content from 2001 to date has obviously gone through some huge changes. You know, the phones that you have in your pockets, just the fact that they're touch phones, just the fact that they have internet, just the fact that they have the processing power that they have, is a huge difference to not that long ago. And obviously all of that was initiated with the first iPhone, which came out in 2007. So there's been huge changes, technological, regulatory changes over that period, which is one of the reasons why our main market is now South Africa, because it's a little bit behind Spain in terms of the technology and indeed in terms of the regulation. But because there were all these changes, and these changes accelerated enormously with the iPhone in 2007, I decided that I needed to diversify. And being based in southern Spain at that point, it's very difficult. It was very difficult, and I still think it's quite difficult to launch a global company from Andalusia. You're a long way away from the main customers. You're a long way away from the main technology providers, so your main providers, and you're a long way away from talent. Access to talent with experience. There's a lot of talent, but it's talent without experience in a specific sector, in a specific vertical. So my way of resolving that problem was obviously far greater before remote working, before Skype, before WhatsApp. The problem was accentuated, and so my solution to that problem was to build multiple smaller companies rather than one large one. And obviously those companies had to be diversified because they couldn't all be in the same sector, otherwise they'd be competing with each other. And the idea was to build companies that had synergies but weren't competing. So basically that's what I did, and I ended up at one point having 8 concurrent simultaneous companies running, in all of them out of Malta and Seville. There were 3 in Malta and 5 based in Seville. And those companies were mainly revolving around digital marketing, although we did a few weird and wonderful things, some of which didn't work terribly well. But everything revolving around digital marketing, digital content, you know, fortunately, luckily, has been successful in my experience. So what we then did, that took me from sort of 2007 up to 2012, more or less. And in 2012, I was overloaded. And so I had to pull out of the day-to-day of the companies that I was running. It had been a process that had been going on for a while, and reached a point where basically I was delegating all of the ongoing day-to-day work to the staff that were working in each of these companies. But entrepreneurs, we have a great weakness. We have a lot of strengths, but we have a great weakness. And I think one of our greatest weaknesses is that being an entrepreneur is a drug. I mean, it actually is. It creates, I can't remember I think it's serotonin, or it creates a drug that actually makes you feel good. The stress involved in any stress generally, but a certain, you know, excessive stress can obviously have huge negative impacts on somebody, but a certain degree of stress is actually good for them. It pushes you to levels that without that stress you wouldn't push yourself to. And when that certain degree of stress releases this chemical, which means that in effect we become addicted to having that certain degree of stress. So as an entrepreneur, I know it sounds odd, but it is true, I can assure you. So you become addicted chemically to certain degrees of stress which are related to the buzz of being an entrepreneur, solving problems, creating things out of nothing, doing new things specifically, you know, because the things that we've been doing for a while don't create that same level of serotonin. So I was getting rid of all my day-to-day, and I didn't have so much to do. Well, I ended up looking for more things to do, and that's where I fell by chance into startup investing, which today you would call angel investing, because we get involved at very early stages of a company. So we started that in 2012 to 2015. It was really the first time was 2010, but sort of playing with it from 2012 to 2015. And in 2015, decided to set up a team and do it, you know, professionally. And so we've done, since then to date, we've invested in, I think total is 70 odd companies. Companies that I would consider that we've properly invested in. So we try to add value to these companies, and those that I feel that we are in a position to add value to, and we made the investment decisions as business angels and not for other reasons, whether that's the heart or which a few times it has been, or for some strategic reason with the company that I'm involved in. We've done 57 investments. So the next evolution, the next natural evolution of that development of myself and the business that we've been involved in, was to move to a regulated fund structure, which basically means, in layman's terms, that we went from investing my own money, which I was earning from the dividends that I was receiving from the companies that I had set up myself, through to investing other people's money effectively, no, and they're looking for a financial return. We're all looking for a financial return, but they're now subcontracting, in a way, that job of investing their money in early stage startups to ourselves, and we're literally now finalizing that process. There's a lot of paperwork. You think there's a lot of paperwork when you're at school. I can assure you that there's a hell of a lot more when you get involved in the bureaucracy involved around financial services or almost any service to a certain extent. So anyway, that's my story. English guy, decide I need to learn Spanish. There's a little family issue there. My mother's Dutch and my father's half Ecuadorian, and nobody in my family spoke Spanish because my grandmother moved to the UK in 1905, and I felt that somebody should. And well, that's where it all started. No? But an English guy moves to Spain, starts getting working between Spain and Malta, and ends up setting up a load of companies, 15 in total, and investing in another load of companies, as I say, somewhere between 57 and 70, depending on how you calculate it. Now, Luis asked me to talk about what thrills us, right? What thrills me, and what I find exciting, and what I see other entrepreneurs find exciting. And I think just before I do that, I'll explain something I think is very important. I'm very much believe in the power of innovation. I believe that innovation is something that advances society, and I'm 99% sure that the majority of the world's population now also believe that, because of what we've seen happening during COVID, and that goes from, well, Teams comes from Microsoft, but Teams in effect was built because they saw the huge growth in Zoom. Zoom is a startup. Those of us that have had vaccines in Spain, a large proportion of those in Spain or in Europe generally, I actually have mine in Malta, but those of us that have had vaccines in Europe, a lot of us have been the Pfizer vaccine, but it's a Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine. BioNTech is a startup as well. If those two things, one that's saving our lives and one that we're using on a daily basis, haven't shown people the value of innovation and the value of startups to generate that innovation, well, then I don't know what will. So I'm personally, I'm a huge believer in the value of innovation. But and I just say one thing, and I think this is a really important lesson. Not all of us are built to be entrepreneurs. I referred earlier, and maybe I went into a little bit too much detail, but I referred earlier to the buzz that entrepreneurs get from creating things, from solving problems. Well, if you're solving problems, it means that there's a problem being presented to you in the first place. And that's where the stress comes from. And then the buzz comes from finding the solution. Not everyone is built, not everyone in their DNA, in their makeup, in their capacity to withstand stress is built to be an entrepreneur. And I think if you don't have that gusanillo, that feeling internally to become an entrepreneur, then maybe it's better not to try in the first place, because it's a very stressful career path. It's a great career path. It has huge, and now I'll talk about the huge thrills that it can give, but not everybody's built for it, and it is very, it's stressful. It's gonna generate lots of sleepless nights. It's gonna generate lots of stress. It might affect your health. I know a lot of people have been affected in health, and to a certain extent, and if not your physical health, most certainly your mental health. There's a trend at the moment, because there was a very famous entrepreneur, I can't remember what he's called now, but a very famous entrepreneur in Spain. He sold 2 companies, very successful companies. He was working on his 3rd company, and just as he was finalizing a really important deal just as he'd finalized a really important deal. It was a financing round, you know, again, the company was being hugely successful. He finalized that, and he suddenly was unable to open up his computer. He was suffering from a very deep depression caused by the high levels of stress that he'd been suffering. And because he came out with this openly, because a lot of the time as entrepreneurs, nobody wants to accept their weaknesses, because he came out with this publicly, it's now a trend to talk about the mental health problems and the stress that stress can cause for entrepreneurs. So anyway, just a word of warning: if you don't have it, if you don't feel this buzz that it's something that you really want to do, you want to create something out of nothing, then yeah, maybe give it some time and see whether that really is your path, because it's not an easy one. That said, it's an amazingly motivating path. You know, you really are creating solutions out of nothing. If you look at any solution, BioNTech with Pfizer, you know, can you imagine the satisfaction that these Kurdish entrepreneurs that set up BioNTech, you know, they're Kurdish for starters. They're Kurdish living in Turkey, so they're Giris, right, in the country that they're working in. And Kurds aren't always looked at in the greatest light in Germany, because there's so many of them, and you know, there's been issues with the far right historically, and unfortunately in the present day as well. So these people that society doesn't always see in the best light have set up a company and have saved the lives of literally hundreds of millions of people around the world. Can you imagine? Forget the money, because money they'll have made a lot of, but the satisfaction for them of creating that solution out of nothing. Well, the same goes for Zoom, right? Another immigrant, a Chinese guy in California in this instance, that has created a solution that hundreds of millions, billions of people are using on a daily basis. You know, the satisfaction of there was nothing, and now there's all of these people taking advantage of these solutions. So the buzz that generates is huge, and you probably, some of you at least, will have learnt about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Well, you know, you're literally in the pinnacle of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. There's auto-realization to a huge extent. So that's probably the biggest thrill that any entrepreneur has, of seeing a problem that exists, an opportunity that exists in the market, creating, inventing, innovating a solution to that problem, and then making it available to the market is probably the largest thrill that an entrepreneur has. You know, the money, as I say, is completely secondary. That's actually another little tip that I give, that if your focus is on the money, you're probably not going to make it. If your focus is on solving a problem that there's a market for, then just by solving the problem and generating market, you will. But the money comes as a secondary issue. You would have to deal with problems every day. Every single day there are problems, but you get a buzz from resolving these problems on a daily basis. And there will be failures. So in my instance, I think it's very important to show people that there are failures, because it's so easy to view other people as you do on their Instagram feed, right? Everybody's happy. Who here is ever unhappy on their Instagram feed? So anybody who's ever unhappy on their Instagram feed? No. We're all happy on our Instagram. I don't actually use Instagram much, but we're all happy on our social media feeds, because we're okay. One person maybe. We're all showing the best of our lives, the best situations we're in, the happiest situations in, you know, on the social media feeds that we distribute. Well, you know, in terms of entrepreneurs, you tend to see the same. You see the press release of where they're talking about a new client that's been sold to, or a new fund, or new fundraising, or the company's now been sold, or suddenly a Cabify is worth over 1,000 million euros. We all see that. What we don't see is the difficulties that have to be resolved on a daily basis, and the nightless sleeps, and the sleepless nights, and the times that you wake up and you think, Jesus, how am I going to be able to pay the salaries at the end of the month? You don't see that stuff in publicly, but it's there. So I think it's very important to talk about one's failures. So I've had multiple failures. When I said that I set up all these companies and there were some of them that weren't digital marketing, it is true that almost all of the ones revolving around digital marketing, digital content I've set up or co-founded have been successful, but not all of them. There was one that was a video advertising solution. This is going back to 2007, so that the solution was great. The idea was brilliant. It's all video advertising now. Yet in 2007 it was too early. Then obviously we had the financial crisis, and it just set us back again, sort of 3 or 4 years. But that was a failure. Before the financial crisis it was a failure. With the financial crisis it was more of a failure. I also, in 2006, all around the time that I said there was this huge innovation in the mobile content market, and that's why we were diversifying. In 2006, I set up a mobile advertising agency. Again, you could look at it and go, all of the advertising I see is on mobile. Okay, in terms of digital advertising, there's TV, although now some of digital TV advertising is digital. There's computers and whatever, but tablets and mobiles is 90% of the market now. Well, again, in 2006, it wasn't. We were building up. We were the first in Spain. I think we were the 3rd in Europe, and we were like the 7th in the world that were building up this specific business. Again, far too early. We weren't based in Madrid, which is where the only clients in Spain were based, and it was 5 years or 4 years later, I closed it all down. Lost a huge amount of money, and ended up paying far more in taxes than anything else, Social Security, etc., etc. Then we've had companies that have been very successful, and because of problems between the shareholders, the founders have failed. In fact, in my experience, the most common reason for the failure of a company is conflict between the shareholders, which is a really important point to think about, because at the moment everybody thinks a startup, we raise money from investors, we build this great solution, we push it out as fast as possible, etc., etc. Investors in a company are shareholders, and conflict between investors and founders can also ruin a company. I have an example of that at the moment. But in my own, as a founder, all the companies that haven't worked have really been either because we've been too early, or because so there wasn't really a market, shall we say, yet for the service that we were running, or because of problems between the founders. In terms of investor, as an investor, the same could be said. Companies where founders, the team end up fighting, end up dying. It's very unlikely that they survive. And the other lesson I've learned is not to say yes from the heart, but to say yes from the head. And the heart can, if the head and the heart are in agreement, then you're far more likely to be successful than just your head or just your heart. And if it's just your heart, don't do it, because it's probably not going to work. And then the last thing Luis asked me to talk about was the situation in terms of entrepreneurs generally, and let's say more specifically to Andalusia, or maybe even more specifically to Seville. So I would say there that there's a huge opportunity at the moment for creating solutions for the market, because as I say, everyone now realizes the value of innovation, and everyone now realizes the value of digitalization. So on the one hand, and at the same time, sorry, there's a huge number of changes happening in the market. Well, whenever there's change, there's an opportunity, and there's more of an opportunity for more agile companies than there is for those that are less agile. So startups and the type of company that if you were to, in 3 months, 3 weeks, 5 years, 10 years time to set up, would be undoubtedly a startup, and would undoubtedly be a small, agile, capital efficient company. And if that's the case, then you can take advantage of opportunities that larger companies will take much longer to be able to take advantage of. And there are so many of those opportunities in the market at the moment, so many, because of all these changes have been forced by COVID. And I don't think that the speed, the velocity at which these changes are happening is going to decrease. In fact, if you look at so many different examples, show that the speed of acceleration is exponential. I know that's something that you get taught in the school. And when there are these exponential changes, and not even, they don't even have to be exponential, but these vast changes happening, or these huge number of changes happening in the market, it does mean there are a huge number of opportunities. So I think at a general level, the entrepreneurial situation is great, that because there are all these opportunities to take advantage of, and the larger companies, the more traditional companies, are slower to take advantage of them. Indeed, if you look at, even if you look at some of those that like Facebook or Google that are completely digital, a lot of them are buying up startups because they're more agile than the company is. You know, Instagram we've mentioned, I think they had 13 employees when they were bought. I think WhatsApp had 30, and they were both bought by Facebook for enormous amounts of money. And Facebook in itself is an agile, digital, well-funded company, and yet it's still buying other solutions. So I think there's a huge potential there. I think I do feel to date that to grow a company to be very large, it's a lot easier in London or New York or Paris or even Madrid or Barcelona than it is in Seville. That doesn't mean that the company can't be built in Seville, but it does mean that, you know, it's more complicated to just run it out of Seville. If we look at an example from this week where they have a large office, one of the founding companies of a company called Singular is based in Seville, and most of their business, I think 80% of their business comes from America, whereas almost all of their staff are in Spain. Jenny Ali, which which brought out a press release talking about a fundraising round of 20 million that they raised in September, and they're a company based in Cordoba. You know, I think at least 50% of their business comes from the United States. Free Pick, based in Malaga, sold for you know, hundreds of millions. Most of their, I mean, their business is global. I think to be able to have, if you do want to grow a company fast and to a global scale, it helps to be geographically close to the centres of finance and commerce. However, the teams, as I say, Geniali, Freepix Malaga, Geniali's Cordoba, Singular has one of its offices in Seville, and most of its staff are in Spain. It is possible to have most of your operations in Spain and have the business elsewhere. I have another startup that I've invested in called the Ava Global, which has a 70% market share of their market in Europe, and almost all of their staff are based in Fuengirola. The company's actually Finnish, but almost all their staff are in Fuengirola. So it is possible to do, but I think as founders you would have to be prepared to either travel an enormous amount or to relocate. And I think generally within Andalusia there's a far faster growth in the ecosystem over the last few years, and this will grow exponentially over the next few years, in part because Malaga is doing such a good job of impulsing the entrepreneurial ecosystem that at an Andalusian level as well, and remote working obviously helps in that respect, but the leading light in that respect as a city is undoubtedly Malaga. And the example of Freepix from Malaga, the example of Medac that sold for 200 million a couple of months ago is also Malaga. So the latest, and then obviously the example of Geniali with the fundraising is Cordoba. But generally the ecosystem is growing, and there's a very vibrant ecosystem at the moment, specifically in Malaga. Hopefully by the time you're actually, I mean, some of you might be doing it now, and I don't think there's any problem with building up a company at this age. One of the latest startups, sorry, this is the last thing, and then I'll leave it open for questions. One of the latest startups that we invested in is a company called Cafla. Cafla's CEO is a guy called Ricard Guillem. Ricard Guillem? Yeah, I think it's Guillem. It's Ricard, definitely. And he was 16 years old when he set up the company. He raised a financing round of 750,000 euros from including investors such as Banco Sabadell at 16 years old. He's now 17. He has operations in, I think it's 5 different countries, 15 cities, and there's over 30 staff. So he's still at school, and he's running a company with operations in 5 different countries, whilst he's doing his school study, and now he's raising a new round with even larger investors, and it's multiple millions. So yeah, I don't think there's any problem with being an entrepreneur young, but when you're in 5 years' time, I think the ecosystem within Andalusia will be far more advanced than it is now. It's growing at a very fast rate, and as I say, most specifically in Malaga, but all of the provinces are seeing the same. And Spain is similar. It's just that maybe certain regions within Spain are going faster than others, and Andalusia, fortunately, is one of them. So anyway, now I'll leave it open to questions. I've spoken enough.
Thank you very, very, very much. And I would like to invite year 8 to start the round. Then we'll go to year 7, then we'll come here to year 6, and we'll start over again. And then we will have a large round of applause for Mr. Horsey, but only afterwards. Year 8, go on.
Hello, I'm Spear Taus Clark. Thank you very much for coming, because I have learnt a lot of advice, and I have learnt a lot, and my brain is wow. But anyways, to the question, you stated before that being an entrepreneur is a stressful career path and is not exactly easy. With sleepless nights, etc. Book comes with positive things though, like a thrill buzz. Anyway, have you done an exercise to manage the stress that helped, like mindfulness, yoga, etc.? And how did it help?
I do indeed. So normally every day from 3 to 4 o'clock, I would be swimming. I'm not very good at swimming, so really what I'm doing is I'm saving myself from drowning as I'm swimming. So I have to concentrate intensely on my strokes and on my breathing, which in effect is a sort of a physical meditation, because all I can do is concentrate on my breathing and my strokes. In addition to that, I do lots of weird and wonderful things, from mindfulness and meditation through to fasting. I'm currently on the 3rd day of a fast, but my number one thing is swimming. Before it was running. Unfortunately, as you get older, your knees give away. And so that's why I moved into swimming, but I think swimming's been more similar to meditation than running was, because running you don't really have to concentrate. You know, it's something that we do naturally from very, very, very young age. And swimming, I never really learned properly how to swim. I still don't know, as I say, properly how to swim. So yes, very much so. The tools such as mindfulness, you know, generally meditation, diet, exercise, are all tools that can improve enormously both your concentration, your sleep, and obviously then your health and your stress levels. I also track my sleep. You know, all of the sort of I don't know. It's probably all of the trendy stuff from California. I don't think I do it because I'm following the trends, but I do all of that kind of things. Yeah.
Thank you very much. That's very interesting.
You're welcome.
Yes, Heaven.
Hello, my name is Carmen, and my question is, how was your start in the world of business, or like, how do you feel? Or
Well, I've lost you, Carmen. I've lost you.
no, I finished. Like, how you feel in the start?
Sorry, could you repeat the question? I lost you for a second.
Yes. How was your start in the world of business? Like, how you feel?
Okay. All right. So as I said at the beginning, I think I've always had the sort of the entrepreneurial bug. You know, stupid memory. But when I was 13 years old, I remember we went for a walk in a national park in the UK, and in those days you could light fires in the countryside anywhere. You obviously had to be careful, but you could do it. And we lit a fire, and we brought a paper, and we collected wood, and it was to make a cup of tea. You didn't have electric batteries and whatever at that time. So and we didn't have a gas stove with us. So we built a fire to make some tea. And as we were taking the paper to put under the wood to start the fire, there was the page with all the share prices from the FTSE index, and British Telecom had just done. Margaret Thatcher did a whole series of privatizations in the 1980s, and British Telecom had just been through its privatization, and I wanted to check the British Telecom share price. I didn't have British Telecom shares, but I enjoyed watching and seeing this kind of thing. And I was 13 years old, and I remember my godfather, who was on the walk with us, looked at me and he said, "Oh my God, you're going to get involved in finance or business in the future." So I think I always had it within me. And then, I don't know, I ended up doing managerial and administrative studies, so business studies in effect, at university. I'm not quite sure why, to be honest with you, I ended up with that. I was very good at economics, and I tried to get in to Bath and Bristol universities in the UK doing what they call PPE, which is politics, philosophy and economics. And I didn't get the grades. I actually failed. Well, I didn't fail. I got a very low grade in one of my A levels. And so I had to choose a different course in a different university. I ended up choosing Managerial and Administrative Studies. So I was sort of pushed down that path. And then also, I think the first thing that pushed me to do my own business was actually when I was 18 years old. I came out to Spain to get a job. I did a gap year between school and university, and I didn't speak any Spanish. You know, I didn't speak a word of it. And so I got here and I tried to get a job. It was just the year before the expo, and I thought, okay, I'll get a job doing, I don't know, construction, working in a bar, working in a language school. The language schools wouldn't take me because I didn't have a TEFL qualification, and I didn't manage to get a job in the expo because I don't know, maybe I didn't look hard enough. I don't know. And so I ended up doing private English classes because it was the only thing I had. It was the only talent I had that I could make use of. And eventually at the end of my year, I had, I had two other people that were working for me doing English classes. So I was sort of forced. I think I always had it within me, but I was forced into it in a way when I was 18 years old, because it was that, or I don't know, or go back to England with my, and say that I'd failed and I wasn't going to accept failure. So I found another solution. So how did it make me feel? Well, I've always, as I say, I've always had it inside me. So it's something that's always made me feel good, I think. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So now we have Alejandro in year 6 that's going to ask a question.
Hello, my name is Alejandro from year 6C, and I wanted to ask you a question. Which was the biggest step in your career as an entrepreneur?
The biggest steps?
The biggest step.
Step. Okay, the biggest step in my career as an entrepreneur. Very good question. I think the most difficult thing for me, and each person is different, but I think the most difficult thing for me has been growing a company. I'm quite good at building things from scratch, but I'm not so good at growing a company, building teams, an initial team, yes, but building sort of departmental teams or however you want to do your organizational structure. I'm not that good at it. You have to start, you reach a point in a company, and in my experience, that you sort of start hitting that point when you're about 30 employees, where you start to need standardized processes for a large number of the activities that you carry out within the company. Whereas before that, you don't need those processes. Everybody sort of knows, you're small enough that everybody knows what everybody else is doing. And as long as you have a sort of an overarching goal as a company, everybody sort of moves in the right direction. But there comes a point where not everybody knows what everybody else is doing. And if you don't have some kind, at least a decent proportion of standardized processes, people are going off in different directions, and it's like, I don't know, it's like balls. If you or hitting on different nails, if you hit on the same nail 30 times, the nail goes into the wood. If you hit on 10 different nails 3 times, they hardly budge. So, and part of that is because the nail's continually going in as you're hitting it. It doesn't stop. You hit one, then you hit another. Well, there's no friction there moving the nail in that you're sort of increasing on with every hit. So with people, something very similar happens, and if you're not all hitting on the same nail, then you don't move forward in an optimal fashion. And I'm not very good at those processes. Those processes and that type of direction requires talents that you can learn, but that I find very frustrating. In the same way I said, not everyone's built to be an entrepreneur, because you have to deal with problems on a daily basis, and you've got to have a very high capacity for dealing with stress, which some people do have. I think I do. I don't tend to get stressed at almost anything, almost. There are people that, like myself, that get very frustrated at dealing with the same problems or the same issues day after day after day. And when you deal with those issues, you have to build these processes. But I find that just building the processes, I find quite frustrating. It's too similar on a daily basis. You know, that said, as life goes on, you become better, you become more patient with age. And as I've got older, I've become more patient, and as I become more patient, I become better at building processes. But the biggest step for me was moving from a small company to a medium-sized company. I've never had a company with more than 45 staff. In total, between all the companies, I think the largest we reached was 150. Whereas one of the startups that I'm involved in is a company called Mox, who do last mile logistics. They have this month, I think they have, like, in nomina, so on a payroll, they have about 600 staff, and then they have a load of other people that drive vans for them, that in effect, you know, are working exclusively for the company. But there's a specific legal situation around vans where these guys are freelancers, because that's the way that the law identifies them. So I think if you counted them as well as the employees, you know, it's on like 1,200 staff. And obviously the founder there and my co-shareholder Gregorio is far better at building processes than I am. But when there are crises, he'll often call me. So I think, you know, we have I think that's an important lesson as well in terms of building businesses, that you need to complement each other. It's like a marriage or like a team. You know, it's like a football team. You can't all be strikers. You know, Cristiano Ronaldo might put his foot out 90% of the time, but he scores the goals. But you've got to make sure that the balls reach him. And if the balls don't reach him, then it's not going to work for him. Well, you've got to have these complementary skills, or if you have these complementary skills between founders and between, obviously you need them between team workers, then you're going to be far more successful than if you don't. A very long-winded answer to your question. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Thank you.
Grade 8, I'm sure you may have some additional questions. There are only a few minutes left.
Hello, my name is Lucas, and thank you for the speech. I'm learning many new things. I wanted to ask you, well, first of all, you said before that in a business that if you're focusing too much on the money and not on creating a solution for the problem, then you're probably gonna fail. So what role does money play in business?
Okay, money is the oxygen of a business. The cash flow of a company is the oxygen. It's the lifeline. Without money, you can't do anything. What I was really referring to isn't that money's not important, but it shouldn't be your overriding personal objective, because as soon as you make it your overriding personal objective, you're not going to focus as well on solving the problem, because you're focusing on the money. And sometimes there are conflicts between what's required to solve the problem, which in the long run is going to make you more successful, and where you get your money. And I'll give you an example of this from my own career. I had one company that was an advertising, what you call an advertising network. We ran advertising for multiple media sites online, and we never invested in product, or we invested very, very little. You know, we were investing very small amounts in the product, and we were taking out almost all the dividends. We weren't leaving anything in the company. That was mainly because my partner, that was his focus, that was his philosophy on life. His father died very young, and he was concerned that something of that, I think it changed his philosophy on life, put it that way, which was great. I think it's a perfect and a very very valid philosophy to follow. However, it did mean that when things went wrong in the market for a temporary period, you know, we had no money to survive, and we had no product to help differentiate ourselves over and above that of our processes again and our sales capacity. We had no real in-house product that could differentiate ourselves to survive that period. So I think if you look back on it, did we make we made a decent level of money? Could we have made a hell of a lot more? The answer is probably yes. We were in a great market at a great time, and we could have done more. Now, does that mean that it failed? No, it was a very profitable, very successful business for a large number of years. But you know, it's not. So it wasn't a failure, but it maybe wasn't the success that it could have been. And that's really what I'm referring to. That if you focus on solving a problem that somebody's prepared to pay for, and the problem's big enough, and the people are prepared to pay enough for it, then you know, you can be a huge success. When Google was launched, you know, Alta Vista, Excite were the two main search engines, and they were solving the same problem that Google solved, but not as well. That Google was focused on, we're going to make our product brilliant, and what search engines do we use today? You know, 90% of us use Google, and maybe 10% of us use Bing at a global level. Same with Facebook. You know, what was it called? MySpace and My Yearbook existed when Facebook was launched, and Facebook just did it better. So because they were focusing on the product, that's really what I mean. It doesn't mean Alta Vista and Excite and MySpace and whatever were failures. MySpace, the founders of MySpace, sold it to Fox for a huge amount of money. You know, that was a huge success for them. But I think if you're more likely to have greater success if you focus on the problem more than the money that the problem brings.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And I'm aware of time, and Mr. Horsey had a meeting afterwards, and we are on the verge of 4:15. So please join me in thanking him a lot for this wonderful, wonderful speech. Thank you very much.